All right, so welcome and thank you for attending today's Technical Assistance webinar. The webinar is presented by Amity Foundation, acting as the third-party administrator for LA County's Justice Care and Opportunities Department and the CFCI Care Grants. The CFCI, or Care First Community Investment, grants are the result of ballot measure J voted in by LA County residents in 2020. Care First Community Investments funds are intended to be invested directly into communities and alternatives to incarceration that address negative outcomes caused by racially driven criminal legal system inequalities and long-term economic disinvestment. Today's webinar is being recorded. You do not have to be on camera. Understand, though, that if you are on camera, your image may be captured in the recording. Staying on the webinar represents your consent to being recorded. And then I would like to introduce today's presenters. My name is Mina Cabrion, and I am the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator for Amity Third Party Administration. I will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in there. And I will now pass it off to our finance team. We can start off with Lorenzo Gonzalez.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar. I'm very pleased to have you here, to meet you, to see you. As I'm looking at some of these names, I recognize some of them as we have already met with some of you, and so it's good to speak to you again. So my name is Lorenzo Gonzalez. I'm a senior accountant here with Amity, and I will pass it along to my colleague Don.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Hi, everybody. I'm the resident new guy. I've been with Amity a whopping 2 months, but fear not, I have a wealth of background experience related to finance. Spent a fair amount of time in the fintech space, worked with nonprofits as well, and really excited about this being my first webinar. Looking forward to your feedback afterwards on how can we continue to help make these of greatest value possible as we do these sessions.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo and Don. So at Amity, we incorporate teachings that center the community before we begin our work. Today, we will use the LA County Land Acknowledgement to recognize the price paid by individuals that has resulted in efforts such as Care First Community Investment. So we recognize that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tatavi'am, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in the genocide of the First Peoples. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. So I will hand it off to Don and Lorenzo. All yours, you guys.
Yes, I think we kind of got this out of the way a second ago, so I don't think anybody forgot who we are, so we can probably move on to the next slide. Yes, so first and foremost, why we're here. As the TPA, third-party administrator, TPA, as the finance team, our objective through partnership with the GAs as well as interactions with you all is to help enable, educate, and empower grantees and their organizations to provide the much needed services in their community. Part of that, of course, is the not necessarily the going to win any bells and whistles in terms of the fund team, but managing your financials are obviously a critical importance to keeping a business or organization financially viable and sustainable. So our goal is, again, any way we can to help edify and help all of you benefit from our experience and knowledge, as well as those that we work with. Today's insights, we're going to cover budgets and actuals. The information we're going to cover is going to be at a very high level. We can go to the agenda slide. Thank you, Mina. We're going to go 101. Some of this, for I'm sure many of you, is going to be a reminder or reinforcement of what you already know, which is great. We appreciate your participation and involvement nonetheless. But for others, it may very well help highlight or illuminate key things that are of critical importance in terms of, again, maintaining the type of financials you need to always have a good health and understanding where you're at. We share a few related observations and insights based upon real world examples, interactions that we've had with different organizations. Next, we'll turn to focusing on some best practices that help address some of those gaps that we've seen along the way, as well as just some overall good tips for, again, maintaining the type of financial records that are so important. And then tie off on making changes to your budget. A second installment of this will be coming, where we'll focus in most of the time on the budget transfer tool. Some of you may be familiar with that. You've maybe used the previous rendition. We've redesigned it. And what we'd like to be able to do is focus on that in maybe in the next couple of weeks or September, to really show you the changes that we've made to make sure that you have the information you need to be able to use that in as seamless and pain-free a way as possible. And then last, spend the remainder of the time answering any questions that we have, or that you have, excuse me. If we're not able to answer those questions immediately, rest assured that Lorenzo and I are committed to getting you answers in a timely fashion, even if it's post this webinar. All right. So again, at a just 30,000 foot level, your budget should be your source of truth, right? When you think about maintaining the various different reports that go into financials, from cash flow reports to balance sheet and P&Ls, things of that nature, they're all critically important for us. You know, today we're going to focus on the budget and specifically tips and ways that it's to help, again, keep the integrity high with the data. And it should be something that as we look at where you house your budget, whatever reporting source you use, that is treated as if this is not something that can be whimsically modified. It also serves as a planning tool, right? We'll talk about this more in the best practices, but as my experience in managing businesses and working with business leaders, looking at your budget, what your expenses are, what their trajectory is, and what you have in the way of cash flow, what you have in the way of funding, right? Those go hand in hand. No different than, you know, those of us, I think just about everybody here probably has a bank account, right? And making sure we're reconciling that we're you know in the black versus the red, and it really requires it, you know, that we have that regular cadence that we're looking at our financials or budget, trend to budget, so that, again, we're able to go ahead and make those informed decisions based upon the data. Also, nobody likes to deal with the big fire drills, right? And the sooner that you identify gaps, the greater the likelihood that the path to a solution is going to be far more manageable. So again, when used properly and maintained, a budget provides you really that dashboard. It provides you that critical information of knowing how to avoid pitfalls, but also how to make those informed pivots, changes to personnel, adjustments in terms of, you know, we need a lower supply spending here, but we need more increase based upon the learnings that you get from that most recent period, say your last quarter or previous year. All right. And some of the common pitfalls, you know, maintaining data integrity. And it kind of goes back to the source of truth, right? I have worked with various different business intelligence systems, and even in big businesses, what I've experienced is folks will take data down, they'll massage it, they'll analyze it, etc. That becomes their source of truth when they report out, but forgetting that the source of truth that's accepted within that business is going to be, let's say, business sense or click sense, right? And then misinformation gets conveyed out there. The other is the reliance on Excel. I'm a huge fan of Excel, used it most of my life, One of my favorite things in the world is an Excel spreadsheet. However, acknowledging that Excel is something that is relying upon human contribution, right? You get breaks in data based upon, the wrong formula. It may be something that's a simple, miskey, transposing of numbers. And so knowing that whatever you consider your source of truth or your financials, particularly your budget, that's maintained with the utmost of integrity. The other is the absence of a financial management solution. Listen, budgets. You have a budget. You're funded. You got to be wise with every penny that you spend, right? And so it may be beyond your means to be able to have a solution, say QuickBooks or Xero or one of those, but making sure that whatever you have is again maintained and as reliable as possible because of some of the things that I've mentioned. Also, really making sure that the roles and responsibilities related to the managing of that data, right? Where there's different checks and balances that high performing organizations have to ensure that data is maintained and governed in a way that helps to guarantee that when they sit down to discuss and make decisions off of that data, it's not askew because there have been too many chefs in the kitchen. The next call out would be with regards to out of sight, out of mind. What I mean by that is, it's very easy for businesses to get busy, right? I've done this with my bank account before, where I was too busy I broke routine and didn't look at, and then these expenditures that I didn't that were not normal, they were kind of out of the norm, came due, and I find myself much lower than I was supposed to be, right? And again, it's one of those things where it's great if you have a source of truth and that you maintain the integrity of that, but it's only as relevant as the attention that it gets as far as how you run your organization, how you make decisions internally, right? And so the call out regarding key stakeholders, however your org is designed, whomever your steward is for your financials, for your bookkeeping, right? They should play an integral role in, business decisions and organizational decisions where planning is concerned. They often are the gatekeeper of the data. Also, it allows for, as I mentioned before, manageable problems and gaps to not become bigger and more pervasive issues. I've seen small businesses as well as nonprofits that find themselves in dire straits because cash flow bills were paid on certain things or expenditures that could have been delayed that have caused them to not be able to pay their employees, right? And nobody wants to be in that situation. They also can lead to audits, right? Alaska fiscal prudence is one of those red flags, right? That can translate into that awful word. But if you find yourself in a position where you are being audited, by maintaining those records, because sometimes audits are just hygiene, you find yourself in a position where you're in the driver's seat and being able to tell the story as far as your money in and money out, especially where funding is being given. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Lorenzo.
Did we skip a slide?
I think we might have, but I don't. It felt like we there. No, that's it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I just talk fast. My apologies.
Okay, so as we have begun to assess the actuals as they've been reported and kind of start to speak to some people, then we've noticed some trends, and we'll discuss those a little bit later on. But right now, we're going to just talk about best practices where your budget and financial accounting is concerned, right? And so in the world of accounting, there's something that's called GAAP compliance. And these are generally accepted accounting principles. Now, what this does is it establishes a foundation or a minimum method of assuring that your books are maintained and that the integrity of them is to the highest, to the utmost that it can be, right? And so essentially, the more comprehensive it is, the greater that you can plan and make adjustments, right? And so this is not just an exercise for the sake of doing it, right? It's not just to see if we require budgets to be submitted or anything like that. You submitted an initial budget with your application for this grant. And that should be the basis for your planning of how you run your organization. And so if it is that it's more, the more comprehensive your budget can be, the better tool it's going to be for planning purposes and will help you to mitigate any kind of risks in the future as we've discussed, right? And there's so much that we're going to repeat and overlap on because the financial world, it's kind of like that. There's so many things that happen in concert, congruently together, that kind of make up the whole story, right? And we have to be on top of all of those various aspects if we want for the entire holistic picture to be accurate, to basically tell a complete story as it should, and then to be used by you to make decisions for your organizations going forward, right? And so what we want to really drive home and reiterate is that your budgets are really a critical, essential document, almost official, right? It's the source of truth that you keep coming back to. And as we have begun to assess the reports that have come in, and we have met with various grantees, one of the things that stands out that's pretty evident is that maybe there isn't the kind of importance placed on the budget, appreciation for the budget the way that it really should be appreciated, right? And so one of the things that is essential to maintaining the integrity of your data and your budgets is, of course, proper accounting cycles and procedures, right? So you are responsible for, right now, the way it works, you're responsible for submitting your expenditures, which we call actuals, right? So when you did when you submitted your application, you submitted an initial budget that was essentially just a plan and kind of an estimation as to an educated estimation as to where those funds would be allocated. And then you did some initial research as to what certain things would cost. And so then you start to kind of build an idea of what it is that you need for your organization to run the services to service your clients, right? And so that should always be something that you refer to, right? And so part of that is proper accounting cycles and procedures. And what we mean by that is not just waiting until the quarter is over to get to now sit down and to go through the last 3 months of records. The best practice is to really maintain your budget on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis even. Now, it may work out for you that usually the way it works is there's a month that happens in your organization, and then within the first few weeks of the following month, then a review is done of your expenditures, what you entered, you get your bank statement, and you sit down and you go through your expenses and you match receipts and you account for every penny that went through your organization, right? And I think that what we can do as we progress, and part of maybe a finance webinar series would be discussing those type of specifics and how to kind of implement those, right? But really, the main message is constant vigilance of these budgets, right? And not waiting till the last moment to compile a bunch of historical data that will only lead to more errors, maybe, right? And so, like we said, it should tell a holistic and precise story regarding your organization's financials. And essentially, you have an original budget and what you thought you were going to do, and then you have your actual expenses that happen throughout the year, right? And so there's really, you want to be accurate in what you spent so that you can track if you have any monies left, if you're gonna, run out, um, what the future months are gonna look like, right? And that goes into how your budget, you should always maintain a familiarity with your budgets, right? And they should be reviewed regularly for forecasting, for future planning. They should be reviewed with the key stakeholders in your organization, okay? And that means the person that did the financials, the person that entered the data, the person that needs to know this information in order to make decisions on how to plan and move forward, right? Can we do the next slide, please? And so part of your key stakeholders, of course, is your board of directors. Now, a board of directors is a crucial component of a nonprofit organization in that the board of directors sets policy. They're the ones that establish the policy. They make the rules. They say, well, it looks like we need to move in this direction. We need to enact these things that we want to happen within our organization. And so the board of directors should be meeting regularly, discussing how things are going. And part of a board of directors meeting is the presentation of the financial reports. And it doesn't have to be at a very specific level by line item, but it gives them a pretty good idea of where your monies are going, where they're being spent, and that way they can plan and forecast for the organization for the future, right? They may say that they need to do more fundraising, that they need more funds, but you always have to know exactly where you are with your budget, right? And so that's having an awareness of your budget and your actuals as submitted. Now, as we have met with a good amount of grantees thus far after they submitted their expenditures or their actuals reports, their reports, which were their expenditures, their expense reports. And we'll talk about this later on when we get to trends, but one of the things that we saw was essentially when we sat down to meet with a grantee, we were meeting with maybe those that did not enter the financial information, that really didn't have a handle on the budget, right? And so as we sought to have a discussion about the budget, then we would start with, by presenting some of the things that we saw that maybe we're concerned about or just want to ask about to make sure that you have a handle on that. We found that many times there were people that could not answer a question as to the accuracy of the actuals that were submitted because we were trying to confirm that this information was correct, right? So we're trying to confirm that this information is correct, and we were not able to do so. Don, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. To that end, excuse me, want to be clear that going back to our, we want to educate and empower. We fully expect that these things are going to happen, to be brutally clear, right? We know the general profile, the experience, work with a lot of small businesses. They're experts in the field, as most of you are in servicing your community, but the back office is just not something that, right? So we anticipate some of this organically, and we see each of those opportunities as a way of transferring some of that knowledge and help illuminate some key opportunities, right? But remember, a closed mouth does not get fed. If some of this information is difficult to ascertain or you're struggling with that, the sooner you raise your hand, reach out to your grant advocate or engage us or both, the sooner we can be there for you as that lifeline and assist.
Right. And along those lines, thank you, Don. You do want to we want to encourage all grantees to include or copy your grant advocate on all correspondence with Amity. the grant advocates, so that way they are aware of everything happening with your organization. They really are your advocates. They are a tremendous resource to use. They have your best, they have your best intentions
Best
in mind,
interest.
best interests, right? With everything that they're doing. And they really, really care about your success. And so always, make sure that you copy them and that they're aware of everything that's going on. Part of our assessments of your budgets and your financials involves speaking to them so that we get their perspective on how things are going, since they're so close to you and they're in front of you. They get to touch you more than we do, seeing that we're in Arizona and they're there in LA. And then I think that they're required to do 2 site visits per year to their respective organizations. And so, that helps them to go out there and to see the work that you're doing and everything that you're passionate about and your reason for applying for this grant in the first place, right? And they're your biggest cheerleaders here. I mean, we all are, but they are your biggest ones, I think, and they're tremendous. Next slide. So I will close on this slide by saying, essentially, then, as it says in the bottom, by managing your financials in a persistent and diligent manner and verifying the accuracy of your entries before submitting data like the quarterly reports, then you will find it much easier to maintain the overall integrity of your financial data. It's pretty simple. Next slide, please. So this is, this speaks to then the importance of your reporting and your actuals to budgeting, right? And the actuals are the expenditures that you have through the duration of your grant for your program, right? And so the more accurate you are with those from the beginning, and that's looking at them and comparing them to your initial budget, making sure that the information is the same and flows, right? The reason we do that is because, again, they're going to help you to assess your program, how it's going, and then this will allow you to make informed, data-driven decisions regarding your organization. And if you make those kinds of decisions, then the chances are that they will be successful, right? As opposed to just kind of blindly moving along and just kind of waiting for something to happen. Everything has to be deliberate. Everything that we do in our organizations has to be deliberate. We cannot expect that things are going to happen organically just like that, right? So if you think about something, and much like life, if you think about something, if it crosses your mind, then it's probably pretty important, or it probably should be addressed, right? It's something that you feel is important, that caught your attention, and therefore I need to address it in some way, or I need to come up with some kind of a procedure or some kind of a schedule that's going to help me to maintain my budget, right? Now, you want to be as accurate as you can, right? There is nothing in these grants that says that there's nothing in these grants that says anything about spending within the year, as far as every quarter I have to spend the same thing, right? No, that's not the way that it works. It works on a yearly amount. So we're tracking your yearly disbursement and how much you get, and we're tracking as you use that throughout the year. So to give you an example, there are some organizations that exist that are grantees, just like all of you, who provide services in conjunction with schools, public schools. So that means that the summer months, those quarters and those actuals, we may not see any activity on their spending because their programming is congruent with the school year. Okay. And so that's just kind of letting you know that if you have a line item and perhaps you didn't spend anything in quarter 1 for it, that's okay, as long as you have a story to tell that goes along with that. Like some people did that said, well, at this time we hadn't yet set up our rooms for this kind of equipment, so we weren't going to buy in the first quarter. We're going to move it to the second or third quarter. Again, just like with the school spending, there were some actuals that we saw, some expenditures, some reports where there were clearly months that nothing happened, and it was just a conversation. Hey, I see here that there's no activity during these months on your budget. What's the reason for that? And then it was a simple, oh, well, it's because we partner with schools, and so primarily we offer services when schools are in session, and therefore over the summer, then we're going to be a little stagnant. And so that's all. That was an explanation that explained perfectly that gap in the actuals reporting, right? And so even if it's just a simple reason, it's okay as long as it makes sense, it stays together, and it tells a story, and it tells the same story, right? And everything is flows together. Did I miss anything on this, Don?
No, I think that's, you nailed it. Yeah, I think we're
Okay,
good.
may I have the next slide, please? And so why are we really talking about this? What are the reasons to really have this budget, and why do you have to maintain it? Because again, it is a source of truth. It is a real tool. Although it's not written in stone, which means that whatever I put on my budget, I have to stick with it. No, it's a guide, right? But it's going to help you to make, again, data-driven, informed decisions. And when we make those kinds of decisions regarding our organization, the likelihood of our success is increased that much more, as opposed to making decisions with no basis or no data to back it up, and just kind of hoping something will happen as a consequence of, right?
Like, look at your feet, right? It's as we were discussing, we're preparing this, it's tantamount to, again, driving without your headlights on, right? Like it can be done, but it's done with much greater risk, right? And it's, again, making sure that you have that visibility and understanding of where you're at that given time. Again, allow for informed decisions and avoid the bigger pitfalls.
Absolutely. And we have to consider the fact, folks, that these are public funds, right? And given to us with the expectation that we will be diligent, and we will do our fiduciary duties, right, to the taxpayers, and that we're spending it the way we said we would, and that we're spending it for the reasons that we said that we would, in creating the services and trying, in our community that we are passionate about, because we care, and we can see in our communities that people need this. And essentially, so we have to answer for these funds. They have to be accounted for, right? And organizations that exist, whether you're a business or a nonprofit, you have to file financial paperwork at the end of the year with the government that lets them know that, again, exactly what it is that you're doing with these funds. I think, is that it for this one?
Add one thing to summarize that. I'm a big fan of a man named William Deming, and one of his quotes that I've always lived by is, "In God we trust, all others bring data." Right? This is what gives us that, right, quantifiable evidence to be able to tell our story and assure those that have enabled us to do this with their graciousness in terms of funds, right? This is the due diligence.
And then when you submitted your application for this grant initially, you said to yourself, this is my best guess as to what it is I need and what I'm going to do, and this is going to help me to deliver the deliverables that I wrote about in my scope of work, right? And so by continually revising your budget, then you're going to be able to see exactly what's happening with your organization. There may be costs that may be different. You may have, when you did your initial budget, you didn't figured this. Essentially, we did our initial budgets without doing the work, getting out there to really see where things were going, right? But as we work, as we're doing what we're doing, and in conjunction with our reports, we're kind of putting it all together, looking at it as a whole and saying, okay, where am I here? Am I addressing what the mission is of our organization? Am I doing what I need to do with these funds the way that I said that I would in my application, right? And some things may change. There may be an example where, due to some kind of stipulation or some kind of law, what was originally proposed by an organization to the work that they were going to do, maybe now they can't do it. And so they kind of, maybe they got to pivot along the same, kind of along the same work, but they got to do things a little bit differently, right? Maybe they need to hire some people. Maybe that requires, that's going to require knowing where your monies are going. And then the fact that maybe I have to move monies around to this item because I anticipate that this is going to happen, right? And so those are just a few reasons why we should always revise our budget. We should always be familiar with them, and they should always be maintained to the highest level of integrity.
You said always revise our budget, revisit it,
Oh,
right?
revisit, excuse
Yeah,
me.
yeah. The revise is not a bad
Review.
word. That's what informs the revision, right?
Always
Yeah,
review.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Don. Next
Got it.
slide. So I think that this is really important, and what I kind of wanted to convey here is essentially these are some things that we are seeing that's happening as very commonly among many grantees, right? And like Don said earlier, this is not an exercise in blame. We're not looking for you to be wrong. We want to help you. We want to make sure things are correct. We want to make sure that everything is transparent so that if anybody has any questions about the funds you received and how you're using them, that you can answer those with confidence, and you can show those that funded you, and you can show anybody who asks you, this is the work that I'm doing. This is what this money has allowed me to do, and I'm very proud of the work that I'm doing, right? And so as we really started to review some things and look at the expenditures, I think that there have been some, if I don't know how many people from year one are here, but year one right now is the longest running cohort and has 5 quarters thus far of reporting that they have done. So essentially, they're the only ones with a year under their belt. Everybody else, year 2, year 3, and PA8. Everyone else is within the first year, right? But we anticipate, based on this first round of assessing the year for year one, like after they were in their grant program for a year, we saw some pretty common things, and I imagine that we will continue to see them. And that's the reason for kind of preemptively getting out in front of you and just talking about things to avoid, right? The common mistakes that we see and things to avoid. So one of the things that we saw was in the expenditure reports was the fact that some line items were used up completely as far as the money that was allocated and that was said that was going to be spent on that line item. And then some line items came in under, where you didn't spend everything that you said you were going to spend, right? But at the end of the year, according to what they have or what they don't have as far as the funds from this grant, they're zeroed out. So what that means is that they went over on some line items, fell short in others, but moved monies around and used everything to even out, right? And so that is one thing that we want to stay away from. And we are aware that perhaps maybe some grantees were given that kind of advice to follow, kind of within the first year, and that's okay. But what that doesn't do for us is it doesn't tell us a real like accurate story, right? It's not as accurate as we want it to be because, like we said, this has to be a complete and holistic picture. Okay.
Can I add one thing with that, Lorenzo? I think just to underscore the part where the decision to do that, let's say for a second one wasn't given that guidance, but it underscores a more concerning note of going back to data integrity that, oh, well, this is just a number in an Excel spreadsheet, we can zero it out, right? That's meant to represent something that's real, and that clearly makes it arbitrary.
So that was one of the things that we identified as being pretty common that we want to stay away from, because that is not considered a generally accepted accounting, a good generally accepted accounting principle, right? So there was that. And then we saw where everybody submits their quarterly reports every quarter, and everything is on one spreadsheet because we're monitoring spending by quarter within the same year, right? But every time that a quarterly report was submitted, the historical quarters, or the quarters that were previously filled out, were changed. Okay, so essentially that means that for the first quarter, I turned in this report and told you this is what I spent. For the second quarter, I turned in a different report and said, this is what I spent this quarter, but then I went back to last quarter and changed some numbers around. And that, of course, does not tell a complete story, and can cause a lot of confusion. That's something that just doesn't. That's
garbage in, garbage out, right? Like
absolutely.
You build that, you move on. It's like putting Earl Scheib on something with body damage, right? It's not really fixing or addressing that, and then you make decisions off of that, which again, it just exacerbates
Right.
over time.
And so going forward, what we want to do is essentially we want to use one spreadsheet, one expenditure spreadsheet that is the source of truth, that we pass back and forth to each other, where you cannot go back and change the historical data. So once entered, we want it to remain that way, right? I think that's pretty much the way we should stick to it. And our job on our side is to review your actuals, then lock those actuals into place so that they cannot be changed after the fact, right? I also saw people kind of changing line item descriptions, so they're not matching up with the line item descriptions in their original budget. And then as they move from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, some of those names of those line items are changing. Essentially, what we want to do is, you don't want to take away from anything, you only want to add to your expenditure reports, right? So if I was going to change an employee's name, I wouldn't change them in the first year because it was a different employee. But if they're getting hired in the second year, I want their name there now in the second year, right? But I'm not going to go back to the first year and change any information because that's not accurate. One of the things that we saw was surplus funds. Now, ideally, we want you to use every penny of your disbursement for the year. But there were some things that transpired, again, things that unexpected things that happen with every business due to outside factors. And so there were many organizations with surplus funds. And that means that if they were given $100,000 for the year, maybe they only used 95 and they still have $5,000 from the first year to use, right? And so we saw that a lot. One of the reasons for essentially giving this webinar and having it lead into the budget transfer request and how that's going to work and changing that was to make it more intuitive so as to be able to account for those surplus funds, right? Because we have surplus funds from year 1 maybe, but in year 2, we're going to get the same disbursement, but we still have these funds from year one to worry about. And that will be perhaps it's going to have to be in the next webinar. This one went as long as we thought it would, and we will certainly,
Yeah, I
provide
was just
that
going to echo that.
example.
Is the next one? This is why we decoupled them. We kind of called an audible and decoupled the budget transfer request tool. I see some questions, and we'll look to address those pertaining. The great news is, we're going to have that session here in September that's going to be dedicated to that, and again, more opportunities to answer questions in the moment to make sure that everybody's grounded in what the bells and whistles of it, so it is intuitive and easy to use when the time comes for it.
Right. And I will close on these common trends of what we have seen by just going back to, again, there were many discussions that we had where grantees could not confirm the details of what was submitted. Said, you know what, I can't really find this right now. I'll have to look for it. I'm not the one that filled it out. So and so filled it out, but they can't make it. So these are the kinds of things that we need to be mindful of, right? And so if we're asked to meet for a review of our financials, then we want to, of course, have the person there that is most intimate with our financials. We want to have, anybody that had anything to do with contributing to that report. You want to know exactly where your reports are and filed away in a manner that is easy for you to find, that is easy for you to identify chronologically, right? And so that you know that this is my first year budget, this is my first year first quarter spending, this is my first year second quarter spending. All of these kinds of things we need to be mindful of and have readily available, so that if anybody asks us for transparency where these funds are concerned, we are right there and ready to answer, right? And I think with that, I guess we can, since we talk so much, we can address some questions.
No worries, no worries. So I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to go. There's only a couple of questions, honestly. So we will go with the first one. For year one grantees that didn't spend everything in year one, can you walk us through a budget mod where we make a line item change, added staff for year 2 and 3? We are confused on how to make it equal in the bottom line when we are adding to the other years.
We understand that.
Well-crafted question, and the simple answer is no, we cannot walk you through that. Next question. Just kidding. No, so forgive me. No, again, the center of the plate, the next webinar, we're going to go in depth on that. But what I would say, whose question was that? Is that Terry's or?
It's Emily Dulce.
Yes. So Emily and anybody else has that questions, you don't have to wait to the next webinar. If you have a pending need, feel free to reach out to us, Lorenzo and I. We have our email address, and we will look to make time with you and your grant advocate if need be to address that. But everybody, rest assured, we're going to have a well crafted, enriching webinar coming here in September, all dedicated
Within
to
a couple of weeks, we hope.
Yeah.
Thank you. And definitely, if you do want to set up a meeting, reach out to your grant advocate and they can get you in touch with Lorenzo and Don.
And Nina, I'll also add that there are many of you that we have already met with, and we're aware if it is that you requested a budget transfer request, if you submitted it, we're aware of that. We have been swamped with virtually all aspects of what we do, trying to get through this cycle, but we're gonna get there. And if you submitted that, we have a tracker that essentially lets us know that was a request that you made. We're looking to review those and have those done by the time you get your next spreadsheet back, which should be sometime next week.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you share how much flexibility we have with line item descriptions? For example, we have one line item for job training certificates and coffee, but we now added certificates for IT and personal fitness. Can we use the same line item for all job training certificates, even though the line item description says coffee?
So I think that going back to the story of trying to tell a holistic, complete story. The more detailed you are, the better off that you're going to be, right? And so my advice to you would be if it is that you could uh, uh, add a specific line item to differentiate between those two, I would certainly do that. Accounting software that exists usually has some kind of a mechanism that allows you to assign maybe a location, a different store, or a certain clientele that
Class
you,
tracking. Yeah.
yes, or class tracking, so that then you can run reports and separate them by that kind of information, right? I think that that's a great, I think that that's a great question to ask because it shows that you're proactively thinking about that, right? And just like we said earlier, if I think it, then I should probably err on that side and therefore set up my books to reflect those specific line items.
Yep. So someone else asked, we overestimated our monthly insurance cost. What is the safest way to utilize these missed funds?
Great question.
So the way that it works right now is that, and this is what we'll cover more in depth in the next one. If you have surplus funds right now, right, which means that you came in under what you originally thought that amount was going to be, you can use those funds in the next year if they are for the same line item, right? For the very same line item. But in this case, insurance, if they fell short of insurance in year one, then they're probably gonna fall short of insurance in year two as well, right? But the point is that the surplus that they have in year one, they can only use it for insurance in year two without submitting a budget transfer request. But if they want to move those funds, those insurance funds from year one and say, we didn't use this on insurance like we thought, but we see a need here in year two to increase our supplies for clients. And so we would like to take that surplus from insurance in year one, what we didn't use. And in year two, we want to request to be able to spend that money on supplies for our clients. Then that is when you would contact your grant advocate and let them know that you need to make a budget transfer, that you'd like to do a budget transfer request, and then they will send you the correct template, and then we would assess it. But essentially, if you're gonna move monies from one line item, from the line item that it was originally intended for to anything else, that's when you have to request a budget transfer request.
Awesome. And then grantees are always able to meet with Don and Lorenzo. Definitely feel free to set that up with your grant advocate so that they could set that up with them. And then someone else did ask, we had to add workers' comp. It's not within our budget, so would we have to use the non-discretionary funds? What do we do?
You can essentially in this case, you can actually, if you wanted to use your project management funds to cover that, you certainly could. And if you wanted to account for it with a separate line item, you can do it that way as well in that case.
Awesome.
Again, holistic stories that help you to tell the most complete story possible, right? And so either in that case, either you make it its own line item so that you have that story, or if you're paying it out of your project management costs, you're still tracking those costs. You want to track every penny and you want to keep the receipts associated with those things. You want all pertinent information reflected in your records for that entry, for that line.
And will we have access to this recording? Yes, all of our webinars are recorded and up on our Amity and You website within 1 week. And it is 3 o'clock. I do want to respect everyone's time. If Don and Lorenzo, if you guys can stay a little bit after to answer a couple more of these questions, I'm sure everyone would greatly appreciate it. But if you cannot stay on longer for our grantees, Again, all of this is being recorded. It will be up, so if you do have to go, we completely understand. What happens in the event if all the records are destroyed via a disaster or something like that?
Wow.
Yeah, I'll start with, that's a horrible situation, and those who had computers crash, et cetera. You use this as a PSA, a public service announcement, redundancy, right? I mean, that doesn't fix it after it's happened, but make sure that you have redundancy for your data, that you have backup copies, that information is secure. In those situations, if we're talking about budget, again, the painstaking process that most have to go through is trying to put that story together with whatever transactional level, maybe hard copy data, right? So again, there's no exact precise, silver bullet, so to speak, with this. The key is, I think, if it's happened, do your best to collate what financials you have in the way that transactional level. And then, we work it out on a case by case basis.
If if you genuinely have a fear regarding that, I would say that keep actual paper records. Make sure that you try to keep electronic records, and then I would even consider some kind of a service that keeps those records in the cloud or something like that, just for these kinds of purposes.
If I track all incoming and outgoing of funds with QuickBooks and Apricot, will that be efficient? One of my football coaches that I pay would like to know if I can pay them 2 months at a time in advance, and I did not know how to answer that question. What is that answer?
So if I'm collating these questions as if I track all incoming and outgoing funds with QuickBooks and Apricot, will that be efficient? In terms of efficiency, I mean, you're entering in two different systems, but again, going back to that last question, you have some redundancy there, if you will. I think it's as far as the decision we're paying your football coach, that's a policy on your end, I believe. I don't know that we have that's beyond our scope of decision making. What I would say is to enable you to make that informed decision whether or not you have the means to do that, of course, is predicated on how well you're managing your budget, what your cash flow is, et cetera. Right. So the more that you're maintaining that, the better you can make informed decisions for extenuating circumstances, such as that type of request. Hopefully that helps. I know that's not an overly committal answer.
That was a great answer.
What about shifting money from one line item to another if we underestimated one and overestimated another? Also, we underestimated our insurance costs.
So
Yeah.
again, that would be that would be the reason for the budget transfer request, right? And so at that point, then what you would do is you would reach out to your grant advocate or to us and say, hey, I want to do a budget transfer request. We'd send you the form, you fill it out accordingly, you let us know where those changes are, and show that on the form, and then we get that back, we review it, and you're the one that, we don't really, there's no reason that we would have to not approve that, providing that it all falls in line with your scope of work and things like that, because you're on the front line and you know your organization and your needs better than we do.
And the last question is, what if our payroll system was not up and we owe payroll?
So Lido, yeah, so struggling to understand what if, I don't know how, I mean, we could follow up afterwards, like separate. I'm not exactly sure what the question for us is, to be candid. I no judgment on the question. I'm just not exactly sure. And we owe payroll.
It sounds like they didn't have a payroll system established before, and need to back
pay arrears.
back pay some of those
Got it. So yeah, I mean, your employees need to be paid for sure, right? I think that, proactive conversations with your grant advocate, if this is a matter of it's going to impact your budget, your cash flow, right? It's going to put strain on your system, and I imagine it might potentially. Again, this is where I would go into action mode of communicate. Who do I need to involve and inform? Again, a well-maintained budget allows you to be able to go, okay, where's the cut line? This is a top priority, paying my employees, right? Where am I going to have to give other places? It may put yourself in a tough position of, you know what, these other things need to be suspended for the time being, right? Until things kind of get stabilized. Or if it's just a matter of paying them and you have it within your budget, just a matter you were waiting, then again, making sure you're memorializing that, keeping those records, but of course, pay them as soon as you can.
And remembering to indicate that payment when you made it, not when it should have been made.
Great call out. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And how do we submit a budget transfer modification? What is the best way to get an update on our budget transfer modification request?
Post-it note. Now, that's where we're getting the tool that we're in the process of redesigning. Well, we've redesigned it, but putting together something informational with it so that it's easy to understand. Will address all of that, right? As far as the turnaround time when you do submit one, whether today or in the months to come, our commitment is 12 to 14 business days. We'd love to get that sooner, right? It's a matter of, again, prioritizing work streams, workload. But you know, that's the kind of the SLA that we've established as of now. Go ahead, Lorenzo, please.
And again, the turnaround time of 12 to 14 days starts now. Didn't necessarily start, you know, before us, for us before. I wish we could have. And like I said, I know we are aware of everyone that has submitted or requested a budget transfer request thus far. And we're looking to shore those up by the time you get your next report for your expenditures next week, right? So we're working to do that. But going forward, the process will be, you know, let your GA know. The GA will get you what you need. Then you return that. We will review it. Once it's approved, then we should, you know, someone will let you know it's approved. And then the next time that you get your actuals to report, your expenditure reporting, then those changes should be reflected in.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that was Cecilia that asked that question. Was that right, Anna?
Yes.
Yeah. So Cecilia, you know, shameless plug for Lorenzo. Me coming on, I think it was mid-July. One of the things that the challenge, just kind of full transparency, is go slow to go fast is the rule. He's had to, on top of managing all of finance on his own, he's excuse me, also had to help onboard me and train me, get me familiar with the systems. So the great news is we've made significant progress, and we're gonna hit it with a full head of steam in the immediate future, allowing us to divide and conquer some of these things that might have been languishing otherwise.
And Cecilia, I can see here your email submitted with your budget transfer request. You were with the Seed House Project. And so it's been some time because it was submitted about a month ago, and I apologize for the delay. But yes, you're on the list to be reviewed and approved by next week when you receive your next expenditure spreadsheet.
Amazing.
Thank you.
You're
I just
welcome.
wanted to make sure we submitted it in the
Thank you
correct
for your
manner. Thank you for
understanding.
that.
No, thank you for your understanding. We appreciate it.
And that was the last question. So again, thank you so much, Don and Lorenzo, and for everyone joining us
Mr.
today.
Milner has a question.
Oh yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I really appreciate this time. I am definitely looking forward for our next meeting. So if you could let me know.
Yes, sir. And what we need to do is where we left off is we looked at your budget overall. We're going to make the changes that we had discussed and then just pretty much get it back to you and make sure that you are okay with it, right?
Right. Yes,
Sure.
sir.
All right.
Great seeing you again, Mr. Milner.
Mr. Milner, we had a good meeting with Mr. Milner. He's a good man.
Thank you.
Doing really great work. So let me commit to reaching out to you to meet by the end of next week. Is that going to be okay? By
Yes,
next
sir.
Friday.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then I will speak with
And
Don.
everybody heard it. Everybody heard it. And it's
We're meeting with
recorded.
Mr. Milner by next Friday.
Thank you so much.
Sabrina, you heard that, right?
Sabrina's gonna be there too.
Right.
So we will end there. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have any other questions for finance, please let your grant advocate know. They will be able to meet with you and get in touch with finance and connect you with them. Thank you so much for joining us today and have a great day.
Thank
Bye,
you, Mia. Great
everyone.
job. Appreciate it. Great seeing everybody.